It's very hard, if not virtually impossible, to get rid of student loan debt.
How can recent policy changes affect your student loans? We're going to talk to attorney David Shuster about that on today's Ask the Lawyer. David, thanks for joining us.
Hey, great to be here, Tom. Thank you.
Well, David, there's been a change in guidelines in bankruptcy regarding student loan debt. So what's going on and what is the change here?
Well, this is fresh off the press. An announcement, as far as I know, was just yesterday. Okay, and so the change is that when you challenge a student loan in bankruptcy to try to make it go away, the Department of Justice, Department of Education, has taken a very tough stance, and it made it really virtually impossible to get rid of student loan debt. I mean, it just doesn't happen. I mean, if the statistic is like 250,000 bankruptcy cases are filed, Chapter 7s, to discharge. It could be Chapter 7s and 13s combined, but the amount of cases where they actually are able to discharge student loan debt is as low as 300. And what that means is you have to own nothing, probably be, up in the age, not have any assets, and really just no prospects of earning anything, and really disabled. It's really tough. I mean, it's very hard, if not virtually impossible, to get rid of student loan debt.
Is this separate from the student loan forgiveness plan that's currently in limbo?
Yes, it is. The student loan forgiveness plan was something that was rolled out earlier that's currently tied up in the courts, or at least in a couple of states. This is separate, and so now what they're doing now is they're telling the Department of Justice, Department of Education to not take as tough of a stance and to basically be a little bit more kinder and gentler when dealing with these cases, and quite frankly more realistic. And so the new guidelines, like I said, I just read through them. I think it was yesterday. And so if you're challenging student loan debt in a bankruptcy, instead of having the requirement of if you own a piece of property, or if you have, $300 a month extra, then you don't qualify for a discharge in bankruptcy of student loans. Essentially, it's as difficult to get rid of student loans as it would be for, past due taxes, criminal fines, potentially, child support and alimony. Okay. Even if there is no realistic prospect of getting the loan discharged. So the new guidelines that they put forth have to do with the policy of the government with respect to challenging the debtor and the debtor's attorney that come into court saying, look, they can't afford it to pay all of this back. It's never going to be paid back. And so the new guidelines are putting a new standard in place, basically, where it's now more possible to make some of the student loan debt go away and to actually get granted a discharge of some or all of the student loan debt without having to be, completely disabled and just, not own a stitch of property.
So you talked about the new policy, David. How much of a difference will this make for borrowers?
Well, it's a big difference because, again, I mean, you're looking at, if you want to qualify for a student loan discharge under the current guidelines before this, I mean, the bankruptcy code says that only in the case where repaying student loans would be an undue hardship is it dischargeable in bankruptcy. So it sounds pretty good, right? If this is an undue hardship on the debtor, then they can be discharged. But the way that was implemented by the Department of Justice, Department of Education, through the bankruptcy courts was this really tough standard known as the Bruner test, which said, again, you have to be practically disabled with no income capacity whatsoever to be able to get these student loans to go away. Okay, I mean, it has to be a really So the new change is that you can fill out a form. If they've made a certain amount of money for a long time, and it doesn't look like they're going to be employed at a rate that's going to be making significantly more money, then it's a more kinder, gentler approach where the government attorney, because these are federally backed loans, can actually recommend to the court that that these can be discharged. The debtor has shown that they just flat don't have the ability to repay this debt, or if they can repay, or what the forms showed under these new guidelines, that the debtor can pay $300 a month, and that's not going to be an undue hardship to pay that $300 a month. Okay, so he'll pay that, he or she will pay that, and then get a discharge of the remaining balance. Whereas under the old standard, it was all or none. If there was any ability of a debtor to pay anything, then no discharge of $100,000 of student loan debt. Whereas now, this is pretty significant. If the debtor shows some ability to repay something, then they'll grant a partial discharge, is the way it reads, which is pretty exciting. I mean, it's something that has to happen because there's, again, it's not realistic to think that these loans are ever going to be repaid in full under certain circumstances. When you have somebody with a lower income capacity, maybe they spent $100,000 on a history degree and they're teaching part-time in a community college or something. I mean, you just can't do it.
And when we're talking about loans that are eligible for discharge, are we talking about federal loans only, or are there others?
This has to do with federally backed loans only.
Okay.
Because when you apply for a discharge of student loan debt, the Department of Justice is the one that will come in and contest that. And so here we're just dealing with federal loans only. No changes to the bankruptcy code yet. I think they're intending on maybe that being something that happens in the future. And so I think I look at this as sort of a starting approach, like I said, for a kinder, gentler approach from the government standpoint, a kinder, gentler approach to say, wait a second, here, this person is on, retirement income and is not disabled, could probably get a part-time job at Lowe's, but are they going to be able to repay the $150,000 Parent Plus loan they signed up for? You know what
Sure.
I'm saying? I mean, it's more realistic, kinder, gentler, and it is exciting for borrowers who go to sleep every night thinking about how they'll just never ever be able to repay this debt, and having that anxiety and stress loom over them.
So who exactly is eligible for this type of loan?
Who is eligible is someone that has, in the bankruptcy parlance, if they're below median income, if the people that are generally, they use IRS cost of living standards. Okay. And so if under the IRS cost of living standards, if you have a household of 4 in a certain county, depends on where you live as how high the cost of living is. But if you have a household of 4 in a certain county and you make $90,000 and you can fill out this form that shows your income and expenses, then you could potentially be eligible for a discharge of student loan debt. It depends on where you live, what those standards are, how you fill out the form, what your medical expenses are. But generally speaking, yeah, I mean, it's not going to be eligible for someone that's earning above a certain income level.
Sure.
They're going to. And that's how it should be, and that's how the bankruptcy process is. It's not. A lot of people think, it's just people filing bankruptcy, walking away from stuff when I paid my stuff. Why can't they? Every situation is different, and so that's what this new guideline change tries to take into account. Is what is going on in this household? Are they owed a discharge of some of this debt? Did they? Is it fair and reasonable? You don't want them to pay back, nil net. Okay, when they should be, having this elective surgery that is going to, be needed, but they can't afford it. So it is exciting. It is for people who will qualify for it, and not just across the board.
Well, David, a lot of great information as always. We appreciate you joining us today.
All right, thanks. Yeah, enjoyed it.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest today has been David Shuster. If you want to ask David about your situation, call the number on the screen. Thanks for watching. I'm Tom Mustin for Ask the Lawyers.